and welcome to another Other Talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. I'm one of your two hosts, Noor Kyle.
And I'm the other one of your two hosts, Mushtaq Ali.
So thank you for joining us. This is our talk that we hold because it's more convenient for people who are in the Middle East, in Europe, and a few other places. So if you're able to be here because of that, we're so happy you could make it. It's very exciting for us. And we also have some folks who are from the US, from other places, and that means we have a full house this morning.
Yes, we do.
New faces and some familiar ones. So this is awesome. It's pretty special, actually. So how do we need to proceed, Mushtaq? Do we need to do the spiel?
We should probably do the spiel.
Okay.
Shall I do the spiel?
Please.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen and children of all ages, thank you for joining us today. If you are watching us on YouTube, you are very welcome here. And if you haven't done so already, let me implore you, nay, entreat you to hit that subscribe button down there and subscribe to us so that you can know whenever we do something incredibly cool like this, and so it looks good on our stats. And also, strike the like button. Punch it right in the finger so that we can mess with the AI that is YouTube's brain and get them to put us higher up in their categories. It would be greatly appreciated. We have lots of fun things going on this year, and trust me, you'll want to know all about it. But we aren't going to tell you. We're going to make you subscribe to us so you can find out. So there you go.
There you go. Thank you, Mushtaq. Yeah, do we have any announcements we need to make?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think we have any right now. So we got all the bases covered so far. What are we talking about this morning? We are
talking about fear.
This is something we touched on in a previous video, but we're gonna go at it from a different angle this time.
Yeah.
Get started on that while I figure out why my camera is being a little bit weird.
Yeah, chopping off your hair. Yeah. You've been wanting a haircut, but that's ridiculous.
Free though? I'll take it. Thanks.
So, fear. Fear is an interesting thing. Did you know that fear is absolutely necessary to your life? How about that? Some people think fear is a negative emotion. And I submit to you that probably there is no such thing as a negative emotion except in a couple of cases. Fear is not a negative emotion. And I will give you the reason for that. So around 1930 or so, this maniacal mad scientist who was obviously evil at heart went to some place and captured a bunch of monkeys of a particular species. And he removed their amygdalas. The amygdala is a little part of the primitive brain, part of the lizard brain, as I like to think of it. And it is the part of your brain that is in charge of fear. So what happened is that the monkeys were absolutely fearless after this, and he turned them loose into the wild to observe what was going on. And he would observe them doing all sorts of behaviors that monkeys would never do. And so he noticed that fear was a big mitigator of behavior. But what he didn't mention in the study, as it was published, is that all of those monkeys were dead within a week. Because if you go up and you slap a rhinoceros across the horn just because you think that you can, bad things are going to happen to you. Fear is absolutely hardwired into our neurology. And one, there is no way you can get rid of it. Two, you don't want to, because that biker gang hanging out down on the corner doesn't need for you to go over and kick over all of their motorcycles just because you think it would be fun. Trust me, it would be bad. So, if fear um, sorry, weird sound out there. It scared me. If fear is something that you can't get rid of, what do you do with it? I would suggest to you that it is absolutely necessary to make fear your friend, to learn to use it appropriately, and to not just let it randomly do stuff. Um, Great example of this. There's this fellow named Moshe Feldenkrais, uh, who is best known for his body work and physical therapy techniques. But he was an Israeli, and he worked at one point in his life, because he was a high-level judo and jiu-jitsu practitioner. He trained Mossad in self-defense. And the way he did this was that he had a prospective uh, person come into his office, and as they came in, he had a guy hiding behind the door who would jump out with a knife, and he would observe this person's natural fear reaction. And he would conform all of their training to that reaction. If the guy did this, he would figure out how to incorporate that as the first move in his self-defense. And by all accounts, this was pretty effective, as long as it was him teaching it, because he could see what was going on. Um, and that tells us that our fear can be useful. And the thing is, fear, because it basically goes directly into your brain, uh, or from your brain into your body without much in the way of filters, is very, very fast. For example, I walk with a cane. Uh, Old knee injuries, old hip injuries, old back injuries. The cane is basically just so that I can go up and down stairs, but I walk with it. And it's a nice cane. I'm very fond of this cane. It's what's called a Stockman's cane, which means it's just under a meter long and made out of solid hickory, which is the world's best impact wood. If you ever need to hit something with a piece of wood, you want a piece of hickory. So it's a good cane. It's very, very sturdy. And a couple months ago, I am walking down the street, minding my own business, coming back from some medical thing, when I walk past this junkyard, and I hear a crash to my left. And before I can even figure out what's gone on, my cane is up into port arms, and I've dropped back about 2 feet and dropped my center of gravity, and I'm ready to fight whatever's coming. Finally, my mind catches up with my body and goes, oh, there's this humongous pit bull on the other side of that fence, and he's just redlined. He's like at the fence slavering, saying, I would really like to eat you. But there was in fact no danger, so I could relax and move on. But all of that happened before my mind could figure out what is going on. The adrenaline dump happened, the body movements happened, the startle reflex took care of all sorts of getting me ready to deal with whatever was coming at me before I had a chance to think about it. And that was all the gift of fear. I see John has got his dog to set upon me to see if I'll still jump. Uh, and I'm
This
sure that
dog's
we have,
not a pit bull.
No, but he looks terribly vicious. Terribly vicious. He could bite your arm off at any moment.
Yeah, love machine.
Snoot. Oh, look at that snoot.
So, how do you get there? How do you get to that point where your body can react appropriately to the stimulus before your mind can figure out what the heck is going on? This is not a rhetorical question. I am open to suggestions at this point.
Feel free to unmute yourselves and chime in.
Training? Can we train for those circumstances?
Oh, we absolutely can.
Instinct?
By the way, instinct, not necessarily. Instinct in and of itself can go any kind of crazy way. Instinct without training is iffy.
I would say breathing.
Breathing is one of the keys to this. You have to train yourself, train your body to breathe in a particular way during the startle response. This is not impossible. And we can go into different ways to do that at another point because we have so little time to talk a bit about this. I want to really focus on the basics of this. But training is essential to this. Untrained fear is dangerous. It's like a puppy. You can have a puppy that's very afraid, that is fearful of the world, and they will have a tendency to bite people out of fear, not out of aggression, but out of fear, especially when the people don't give them the right signals. People are kind of the same way. So just like you train your dog, you have to train your fear. You cannot get rid of your fear. That's the first step. Fear is there. You could probably have your amygdala surgically removed if you found a doctor with no ethics. And then you would go out and try and play catch with a crocodile. It would not be good. From primordial times, our fear has kept us alive. It has kept us from doing many stupid things. Not all stupid things. I'm here to attest that I have managed to do stupid things even if I was afraid. But fear can be trained, and it must be trained because humans are fear-based beings. When you get down underneath all of the other stuff, when you start digging down through all of the layers of emotion, when you get all the way to the bottom of the person, there's a little ball of fear there. And this is one of the great secrets of the universe. The first time I learned this, one of my early teachers looked at me and he said, I know that you're afraid of everybody out there. And I had to say, yeah, that's true. It's honest. It's a scary place. And he said, what you don't realize is all of those people out there are just as afraid of you. That big old guy over there that's flexing his muscles and acting like a complete, alpha male, he's only doing that as a puffed up warning sign so that people won't come and attack him because he's afraid. That CEO who was worth $1 billion, he has all of that money to protect himself from that inner sense of fear that he has. And when you realize that everybody is afraid, all of a sudden you have developed a superpower. Not that you become fearless, but that you accept fear as an essential part of the world. And that you realize that your species is built from the ground up with a foundation of fear. That was life-changing for me. Totally transformative. Because after his saying
Yeah.
that, it made me look at everybody and pay more attention to what I was seeing and going, yeah, this is all fear-based behavior.
Mm.
Two kinds of fear. There is phobic fear, which is run away. And there is counterphobic fear, which is it's scary, attack it. Can go either way. It's very binary. But it's still driven by fear. Great things have happened because people have confronted their fear. You know, pretty much many of the great advancements in humanity have happened because people went, yeah, I'm afraid and I'm going to do it anyway. You all following this so far? Have I scared you yet?
Mushtak, do you mean that there is a third option then?
Yes, there is a third option. You don't have to run away. You don't have to attack it. But only if you can consciously allow your fear to be there and move with it. One of the things about fear is it immediately puts you to sleep. I can't stress enough how deeply hardwired fear is into our systems. And when the fear response kicks in, it completely takes over. It's mechanical. It's part of your machine. And it's the part of the machine that says, I do not want to be destroyed. I do not want to die. I do not want to be hurt. Therefore, I must protect myself. And because it's mechanical, we will do mechanical choices. Usually yes, no. People will have developed a habitual way of dealing with their fear. And it will come out no matter what the circumstances. So, there were two ways that I dealt with my fear when I was young. One was to make sure that I was the smartest guy in the room. So I studied everything. But I have not studied how to make that damn digital existence to shut up. And the other was I did a lot of martial arts. I've been doing martial arts since I was like 8 years old. You know, my grandfather taught me how to catch wrestle and how to box starting when I was 8. And I never stopped. So that was also useful. Fortunately, as I grew and developed as a human being, I could let go of both of these things. The need to be smarter than everybody else so that I could protect myself using my intellect, and good enough at martial arts that nobody was going to physically dominate me. Which is a child's response. You know, as I actually began growing up, those responses changed. I didn't need to do that anymore.
So fear, we're talking about fear. When does fear become despair? And when does fear become generalized anxiety?
Fear becomes despair when you think that the situation is hopeless and there's nothing to do. You've run out of your perceived options. Anxiety is low-grade fear that is wandering around with you and never stops. I mean, fear is supposed to do a bunch of things. You know, when that dog jumped out and hit the fence, my heart rate went from 0 to 100 in, a fraction of a second. I could feel the adrenaline dumping into my system, getting me prepared to fight or flee. All of this. Now, I could have stayed in that state for hours afterwards. And if you don't know how to get out of it, that tends to be what happens. Your fear should only exist in the moment when it's appropriate, and at all other times should be waiting patiently to protect you. So right now, you might be afraid. If you check inside, you might feel a sense of generalized anxiety. You might be afraid, oh my God, if I say something, will he think I'm an idiot? Any of these things. And the answer to that is no, I won't. Don't worry about it. You can relax. But part of how you learn to turn fear into your tool is to know how to turn it off when it is no longer appropriate. Harder and harder these days because the world is changing faster than our evolution. We basically have the same neurology that our ancestors were issued 200,000 years ago. That has not changed much as far as we can tell from looking at the fossil record and all of that sort of thing. But let's take, say, 4,000 years ago. 4,000 years ago, we were just inventing agriculture. Everything was changing in the world. Hunter-gatherer cultures were dying out. Agrarian cultures were coming to the fore. And we're still operating with hunter-gatherer neurology. 1,000 years later, we're still operating with hunter-gatherer neurology. Today, we're still operating with hunter-gatherer neurology. Our neurology has not significantly changed in 4,000 years. We are the same humans now that we were then. There's not been any significant evolution in the hardware. The software has changed, but the hardware has stayed pretty much the same. You understand that analogy? Everybody's staring at me blankly.
I understand it. I'm not sure it's quite right.
How would you say it better?
What I would say is we've got the hunter-gatherer background. I suspect we changed neurologically with primitive agriculture and the hierarchies, and we may have changed again with cities.
Show me the changes, because we're talking biology.
This is hypothetical, but it's more like we learned something about how to make nice to hierarchies.
We've known that.
Might be in our brains, and
yeah.
Some of us learned how to at least tolerate living with strangers instead of, an attack response.
Did we have an attack response to strangers before?
I think, and this is pretty hypothetical, but I think during the primitive agriculture period, we probably became more insular.
That's possible, but that's doesn't mean that we changed our neurology. That's the software change.
Well, hard to be sure there, I think.
We're pretty sure because we actually have some remnants of people back then. We can look at their DNA. It's hard to look at the DNA of somebody 200,000 years ago. 4,000 years ago, not so hard. So I don't see any evidence of hardware changes. I'm willing to see them if you can find them, but until then, um, this is one of those. It's an interesting speculation,
Mhm.
but all of the evidence so far that I have run across personally says that there have been no significant changes. Maybe we've grown taller, but our brains have remained pretty much the same. Same size. Well, actually, our brains are a little bit smaller now than they were back then, because you need to be stupid to live in this culture.
Hmm. Well, one other unrelated thing, which is training appropriate responses to fear, because you had a straightforward response to something coming at you, but there are other kinds of situations where a different response would be needed.
Yes.
So,
And
I mean, I'm sure it can be trained. I just am curious about how.
that actually gets into the next bit.
I would love to make time for John's thought first,
Yeah.
though.
John, you have a thought?
I have a thought. Oh, okay. Hold on. I was actually going to say that the next bit I think is appropriate for the fact that in our culture we're going through a period of, for lack of a better term, culturally speaking, a period of like an epidemic of despair based on fear.
I mean, there is kind of this learned helplessness at this point, right? That comes from being hopeless about what one's options are and what possibilities might be.
Exactly. And it is also being driven by, of course, other mechanisms as well outside. And of course, Mushtaq, you hit the nail right on the head about how our neurology is not, it's the same thing, different day, just different mechanisms now affecting it in that regard.
And I think we are deliberately manipulated in that direction as well by a lot of, political, economic forces out there.
Exactly.
I should note that there is one change or one significance that we have noted when it comes to the amygdala, which is the fear creating or responding part of our brain. In so-called conservatives, by and large, the amygdala of their brains is larger than in so-called liberals. I've looked at the studies. This is not definitive at this point, but it's really interesting. And this is done with, MRI scans and all of that kind of stuff, so you can actually look at what's going on inside the brain without opening the skull and go, all of these people who self-identify as conservative, religiously conservative, Trump supporters or Ayatollah Khomeini supporters or whatever it is, whatever your flavor of conservatism is, have larger amygdalas and tend to be more afraid. Now, we don't know, this is a chicken and egg thing, we don't know if the amygdalas have grown larger in these people because they have used them more to be afraid, or it's some sort of interesting genetic drift. We don't know anything like that, but it is suggestive that a lot of what we see for conservatism worldwide in any time is deeply based in fear.
Go for it.
Yes?
Gordon.
Oh, me? Yeah. No, I was going to say two things. One is that I think the work that we do here, it sort of offers an option to despair. But I also read that people who suffer from anxiety, for instance, their amygdalas have been shown to grow over time. So
It would not surprise me.
so it becomes like a self-feeding loop. And I suppose that a lot of movements, be them political or otherwise, who tend towards the extreme side of the spectrum, they're always motivated by the idea that some unknown force is out to get them, right? So it's back to that same almost primordial fear response and turning it into culture.
Yeah, and we're talking about training fear to be a friend. Like, you can train fear to rule your life, essentially.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens to a lot of us who have experienced what we call generalized anxiety. Wearing in that groove, and then it becomes your normal. Sport.
Well, you're looking thoughtful.
I have many things going on in my mind from what you were saying. One of the points that I think is emerging is perhaps a question. In our work, in the work of being awake, in order to perform practices to be conscious adults, mature adults, is fear to be regarded as just another one of the rasa-like emotions where we know it, we recognize it, we feel it, we hear it. If it's valid, we act upon it. And if it's not, because it's coming from some extinct part that is that is no longer valid, we simply let it go. So is it a question of simply educating ourselves to know fear? You know how there was this surf company that had T-shirts with "No fear"? I can't remember what company it was. It was N-O, no fear, as in you're fearless. But it's better, I guess, to know it as in K-N-O-W, no fear. But I'm curious to know how the fear biology, the fear dynamics, whether it's from sociology, political aspects, how does that come into our work, Mushtaq?
Um, the first thing that we have to do is break the power of fear to make us go completely unconscious. This is not easy. Um, there's an Arabic word that directly relates to this, and it's wuquf. Like when you go on Hajj and you stop in front of Mount Ararat,
Yep.
that, the pause.
Mm.
And that's how I tend to translate it rather than any of the other meanings is it means to pause. And this is an old Sufi practice that goes back who knows how far, where you are given a stimulus to pause and be awake. So you're working, you're doing stuff, and the sheikh walks through the teke and goes, wukuf! And everybody freezes where they are and drops into a state of awareness. Be awake, be present, be in your breath. And then he'll release them and they go back to their work. This is one of the steps in learning to handle fear is how to create that pause. It's like, yes, something scares you and it's immediate. You know, the dog is barking at you through the fence. And you're like, and then you pause and you let everything settle as you drop into, for lack of a better word, zanshin to deal with whatever threat it is. And yet your body has been prepared by your fear. Your adrenaline has secreted into your bloodstream, your heart rate is up, your breathing is up, uh, everything's ready to go. And then you take conscious control back and allow yourself to be the witness, not even the driver, because if this is a fight, you can't think that fast. You have to rely on your training. You have to rely on your body knowing what to do at a much deeper than conscious level. Because if you try and think your way through a fight, you lose every time, 100% of the time. John, back me up on this.
I got your back on this, bro. By the way, this reminds me of an old joke. What do you call a man with no fear? An ambulance.
John, by the way, for those of you who don't know, which is most of you, is a very, very high level martial artist, still in Chicago for God knows whatever reason. And if you happen to be in the Chicago area, he's a guy you'd like to train with. Yeah,
Thank you,
very
sir.
good with a
Your
sword.
stamp of approval is always appreciated.
Hey. Yeah, it's great to have you here, John.
Yeah, John is an old friend. We have had fun together on numerous occasions.
This is very true. And we laugh a lot too, which is helpful.
And we laugh a lot. And he helped me subject my students to a lot of fear at various times. Yeah, because he used to put on this really good tournament every year in Chicago, and I would drag my students down there to fight in the tournament. And since most of them had never actually ever been in a real fight, they were terrified, and they got to deal with it.
Good news is everybody was terrified.
Oh yeah, that's what I was trying to tell them, and they finally figured it out. But we digress. Let us be afraid some more. Amro, what do you think?
Yeah, I think this is quite interesting. So I'm a martial arts student in Mr. Sayegh School as well. And when I first joined, one of the first reasons I told him I joined for was to try and gain more confidence. And I think this, well, lack of confidence kind of emerged from my fears as well.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So I find this whole thing very interesting. I'm really trying to understand, the nature of fear and what do we do with it? Because I mean, I agree that it makes perfect sense that you can't eliminate fear, but maybe educate yourself to use it to your advantage.
Yes. So I would suggest for you that you try an experiment, which is for, say, the next week. Imagine that everybody that you meet on the street is afraid of you, perhaps even terrified of you. And if that were the case, how would you behave?
That's interesting.
Yeah. If you knew that, especially if you're at Wild School, for instance, and you're about to spar, if you knew that the guy across the mat from you was afraid, how would that be for you? Try that for a week or two and see how it feels.
Sure.
So back to the idea of the pause, the wuquf. What is that like? Remember, the first and last thing you have to do is breathe. So after you have the initial shock of fear coursing through your system, like an electrical charge that has just shot through you, you'll notice that you've probably stopped breathing. So the first thing that you have to do is exhale. Pause for a moment and relax. And let the air come in as you focus your attention on the present moment. You have to be in the present moment. You have to be awake to the present and what's going on around you. You have to let your focus go down from this really tight focus, because when you're terrified, you get tunnel vision. You have to let it open up so that you can see if that scary thing there has friends lurking around. And that's very important, because most predators are midline predators. That means that, yeah, they want to eat you, but there are things that want to eat them. You know, not everybody is the Kodiak bear. Kodiak bear is an apex predator. There is nothing in the world that wants to eat the Kodiak bear out in the wild. So he doesn't have to worry. You know, mountain lion walks through, bap, no more mountain lion. That's not you. You are more like a wolf. A wolf is a midline predator. That means they're going to go out and they're going to hunt their food, but there are other things, like Kodiak bears, for instance, that might hunt the wolf. So you have to be aware. And one of the tactics that wolves use is, I love this, you'll have a bunch of wolves and they'll go out and they'll hide. And then you'll have one wolf who comes up to the caribou and goes, "Hi, guys." And the caribou go, "Ah," and they run. And they run right into the wolves that are waiting for them, who jump out and say, "Hey, guess who's coming to dinner?" So that's why you have to get your awareness expanded back out, because if you have tunnel vision, you don't see the wolves over there. Go away. God, everybody's annoying me today.
That startle or annoy you?
Yeah. So
Attack wolves.
attack wolves. Yeah, they're going to be lurking in the bushes, and you have to notice. You have to train yourself to bring your awareness out again from that tunnel vision that fear produces. Fear tells you there is an immediate threat. What you need to know is, are there any other threats? And is this threat in fact immediate? One of the things that I determined when this dog startled me is that there was a humongous chain link fence between me and the dog, and a quick glance showed that there were no holes in it. So I just went.
Yeah, last year, I have a story. Last year, I was wandering in the forest. I like to go trackless in the forest sometimes, just with a compass in the swamplands of Florida. And this one time, I suddenly realized that I was lost. And then it started to rain. And then I got scared. Irrational thoughts of I could die of hypothermia. And my first reaction was, this forest is not that big. I'm just going to pick a direction and blast through to try and get out, which would have been bad decision. I would have ended up meeting a swamp that would have defeated me. I had to overcome the fear, and I paused. I just stopped. I just wanted to move, and I had to stop myself from moving and sit down and go back to basics. What's the layout of this forest? I pulled my compass out and I figured out where I was and found my way out.
That's a perfect example of what we're talking about.
Really is, yeah. Thanks, John. I could have gone so many ways, right?
Yeah, and I
manage
mean,
to
that's,
seize that pause.
yeah, that's the classic pattern. The forest being lost in, or the feeling of being lost in the forest was the wolf that jumped out and went, "Hi." And Jonathan's first reaction was, "Run wildly away from the threat." But beings as he is, not hardwired into doing just the mechanical thing, he saved his own life. Because we all know that in Florida there's alligators and pythons and man-eating iguanas and all of this stuff out there in the swamps. And you don't want to end up with them. So, yeah, that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. So, as Mullah Nasruddin used to say, breathing is very important. If you don't think so, hold your breath for 5 minutes. It's one of my favorite Mullah Nasruddin stories, actually. And I'm going to tell it to you because it's appropriate to this moment.
Yeah, I have to say that was brilliant.
Yeah. So Mullah is sitting under the tree one day, and a bunch of students come up to him, and they say, "Mullah, what is most important in life?" And one student says, "I think that it's to do the obligations of our religion every day, to make sure that we do our prayers, that we pay our zakat, that we do all of these things." And another student says, "I think that it is to do the acts beyond the requirements of religion, where you were kind to people." And another one says, "I think that the most important thing in the world is to fear Allah." And Mullah looks at him and says, "All right, everybody take a breath in and hold it." And then he just sits there and looks at them. Just waits. Let he who has ears hear. So, the pause. This is something that you have to learn if you're going to deal with fear. The ability to pull yourself back from the mechanical reaction that you have developed probably randomly throughout life, and to bring yourself back to conscious awareness. That randomly thing is important because, so here you have a deer grazing in the woods, minding his own business, and a mountain lion comes up and goes boo. And the deer jumps straight up in the air and 4 feet to the left, lands and runs away. The next time something startles the deer jumps 4 feet in the air, 4 feet to the left, and runs away. And he's stuck with that 4 feet to the left, even if there happens to be a cliff on the left side of him. Because that's his unconscious mechanical reaction that worked once, so it must work forever. Your fear will give you the basic tool set that you have wired in, but it won't tell you, don't jump to the left this time. There's a big drop off there. It would be bad. So you have to bring yourself back to consciousness. And you do that through this idea of the pause and taking a breath to settle yourself down. This is incredibly important. They say if you don't do the wukuf during the Hajj is the pilgrimage to Mecca, if you don't do it, your Hajj doesn't count. So that means that it's pretty serious learning to do this pause and wait. I don't think anybody understands it anymore, but yeah, probably I don't either. So, something to think about, how important this pause is.
would it be fair to say that since we're giving examples of external things from the outside, would it be fair to say the exact same thing relates to the fears that come from inside us? I remember, I think in the last talk, Bethany said something about being afraid to put forward an idea, something that was a bit different, and the fear of being judged. Is that the same kind of fear but disguised elsewhere? I guess I'm asking is it the same fear but with different hats?
Yes, it is the same fear. And it's even harder to deal with because it is the fear of the future or the past. So I'm sitting here and I'm going, I have to do a talk today. Oh my God, remember that time that I did the talk and I just could not get my words together and it was all terrible. And what if these people don't like me and there's going to be people here who I don't know, and there's John and he's always making fun of me and all of this kind of stuff. And I can make myself sick doing that. And all of the fear comes up and it's churning. And it's not even fear of something that's real. So real fear versus unreal fear. If the thing that you're afraid of is in the future, it's not real fear. Real fear is in the moment. Real fear is the dog snapping at you through the fence. Real fear is the wolf jumping out and going, would you like to come to dinner with my family? That's the real fear. The illusionary fear is the ones that we create in our head from past events and future possibilities, and our body processes it exactly the same way as the wolf jumping out. We can't tell the difference on a neurological level between, oh my God, what if Amro thinks that I'm a complete idiot for blathering on like this, and there's a rattlesnake under my bed. That will wake you up, let me tell you.
You don't get to have like a rational dialogue with this part of your body. It just does what it does.
It does what it does, and your magical ability to bring yourself back to the present moment and to bring your awareness to the here and now is what helps you deal with that. Because your brain is going to, the more you do something, the easier it is for you to do. What you practice is what you will do in stress. If you practice being fearful for a future event, you will be fearful. If you practice being centered, you will be centered. And sometimes it's just a matter of doing it over and over again. But what you practice, you get good at. And there comes a point where you get to choose that you would rather not be good at fear. Does that make sense?
That's kind of what I was mentioning earlier about you wear in a groove, and you do that by practicing the same thing over and over again.
Yep. That's why, and those of us here who have done martial arts will tell you that we do the same frickin' technique over and over and over again. Over and over and over again. Hanging upside down from the rafters, we do the same technique. Every possible way you can think of, we do the same technique until it comes so natural that we can do it without having to think about it.
Well, I saw Born unmuted. Is it okay if we get to him?
Yes, of course. I love hearing.
Yeah, I was just thinking about when we are living, especially for those of us who are here in Scandinavia, which is a fairly safe place. There are actually very few avenues to experience, should we say, like natural fear or that instant fear of being attacked or something like that. There are
Dude,
very
hire
few
me. I'll come over and
existential
scare you.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that there's a lot of that internal fear. One of the best-selling books here was a book called boss of your own life, like how to take charge of anxiety and things like this. A lot of internalized fear, because most Scandinavians, I think, live in this society where a lot of these natural predators, to put it that way, have been taken out of the equation.
Oh yeah, what you say is absolutely the case. I remember the first time I rode on the underground in Stockholm, right, going from where I was living at Nackrosen station down to the central depot. And you know, I'm used to riding the subways in New York, riding the trains in Chicago, right? So I go down into the subway and my radar is dialed up to 10. It's pinging off everything. And all I'm getting back is happy, peaceful. Look at how pretty everything is. Smiling people, no threat postures anywhere. It was the most disconcerting experience I had had in a subway ever.
But it probably also means that a large degree of the people are not learning how to handle the fear response very well.
Probably not, but they don't learn how to handle it in New York either, so I'm not too worried about it. Given a choice, I would rather live in Stockholm than New York. I would much rather ride the Stockholm subways and not have to worry about this person over here who looks different than me, because he's just sitting there being mellow. I mean, I don't know if it's the same way now, but that's how it was back in the 80s. But there are ways to experience that fear. I mean, do a martial art. If you are doing a martial art and you don't get scared from time to time, you're probably not doing a martial art. Just saying. I mean, I trained with my closest friends, people who I knew would never want to hurt me. And when we were sparring, I definitely had my adrenaline up because they were swinging that stick at my head. Fast, hard. And yes, it was only a wiffle bat made out of plastic, but my body didn't understand that. So you get fear. There are plenty of scary things to do in Scandinavia. You know, take a boat out on the water in Norway, for God's sakes. That terrified me. So there are ways, but sometimes you have to create these things for yourself in order to learn how to deal with them.
For the sake of practice.
Yeah.
Doing the same thing over and over again until you finally have a level of developed quote unquote comfort with it to the extent that you can deal with it.
So I suppose that's where fear should become our friend, like Mushtaq's friends who swing at his head.
Yeah.
We can take that fear and work with it.
Yeah.
So like I said, anytime you want me to come over and swing a stick at your head, just let me know.
Always welcome.
So let me do a double check on my notes here to make sure that I've covered everything that I wanted to cover.
There were notes today.
Oh yeah, I had notes. I should have sent them to you. Then you'd know what I was talking about. But then you'd know what I was talking about. Where's the fun in that?
I get to be surprised along with you guys.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's nice for me too.
So that's pretty much it. You ain't never getting rid of your fear, and you don't want to. Because if you don't have fear, one day you might think juggling rattlesnakes is a good idea.
On the other hand, I mean, I remember my teens and 20s. I thought getting rid of my fear was what a quote unquote person, spiritual person did. And so I beat myself up a lot for not having done that. This goes to show that you can get yourself in these traps of going to one extreme or holding that as the pinnacle of theory or whatever. And you set yourself up to be hurt or disappointed in a very deep way. No need for that, right?
No need for that.
It's like when you've experienced pretty much any anxiety that you can imagine, and like I've gone through it all. Now I'm through it, and I'm a master of this. And anxiety will always find a place to take you, which is worse than anything that ever went before.
Yeah. And there's no need to feel again like a failure in that moment. You just, okay, well, here's another opportunity to practice the skills that I already have, and they can be applied to this as well.
Yeah, I just saw something yesterday. It said, feeling the fear and doing it anyway is bravery, and feeling the fear and doing it anyway is stupidity. And there's just a fine line of difference between the two.
Pause gives you the opportunity to
Yeah.
kind of discern the difference there.
Yep. And remember, we know from various like black box recordings and stuff that the most common thing for a people to say before they meet a horrible death is, oh shit. But the second most common thing for people to say is, hey, watch this.
Is it stupidity if it's the real fear, and then if it's the wolf saying boo, and I'm like, oh, hi wolf, and the wolf eats me?
That would be stupid, yeah.
It would be bravery if it's like the illusionary fear.
No, it's bravery if you realize you have to fight off the wolf, because if you turn and run, you're going to trigger the wolf's prey drive and it's going to chase you down. Bravery is standing there and being willing to fight the wolf if you have to. Interestingly, the wolf doesn't want to fight with you. I have even done this with black bears. I've never tried it with a brown bear, but I've done this with a black bear, which is bigger than me, stronger than me, and definitely could have me for lunch. And I'm walking through the forest and I confront the black bear, all accidentally because I try and avoid this. And the bear goes, right? And so I go, and the bear goes, okay, there's a fight going to happen here. He's not threatening me. I don't need to fight. If I fight, even if I kill this guy, I might get hurt. And so the bear drops down, turns around, and walks off. The predator does not want to get hurt getting the prey, because if you get hurt getting the prey, you're probably going to die. And you see this if you watch predator and prey species interacting with each other. The lion runs up and jumps on the Cape buffalo. And the Cape buffalo turns around and throws him through the air and bashes him up against a rock. This is not good for the lion. He's probably just broken 3 ribs, and he may not survive that. So predators do not want to go after prey that can hurt them. Just a thought on predator-prey relationships. So courage is being willing to hurt the wolf if you have to. The wolf doesn't want to hurt you, though. Wolves don't eat people, as a rule.
You may not want to hurt the wolf either, right?
No, who would want to hurt a wolf? They're cute. They're nice. They're sweet. They like their children.
And yet,
people are afraid of wolves. because we tell stories to each other. They're the only wolf that we know of that has historically been an animal that will hunt human beings is the Iranian wolf. But American wolves, there is no evidence of American wolves ever attacking a human being if the wolf wasn't sick or made a mistake. The stories of somebody being in the woods and having a wolf come up and bite them, right? And then the wolf jumps back and goes, "Oh my God, you're not a sheep. What are you? I don't want to eat you. Sorry, just leave me alone." This happens a lot. But yeah, so the reason that wolves have a bad rep is because they are competitors with human beings for prey. Remember, the good shepherd is going to take the sheep, shear them, kill them, and eat them. That's what a good shepherd does. This is why when some priest went up to the Inuit people and said, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." And they went, "What's a shepherd?" And they explained that a shepherd is somebody who herds animals. The next morning, the priest woke up and all of the Inuit were gone. They had vanished into the ice. Because they understood that the only reason that you herd animals is to kill them and eat them. So using the shepherd metaphor for native peoples who live on the ice up in the Arctic Circle does not work the same. And remember, the sheepdog's job is to protect the sheep so that the sheep herder can eat them rather than the wolf. Just throwing that in as a by the by. So, I have rambled for you, Malu. I hope that that helps, or at least confuses you. So, any last thoughts and questions? Because I think we have come to the end of our time. I don't want to squeeze it out. Yes, Malu, or Roland, either one, both.
I'm reminded of my time as a bike messenger in Berlin, where fear was a daily thing and near-death experiences are frequent. And I was always wondering about, I stopped doing this after about 3 years because it was just too much stress of constantly being in that position of almost dying. And that's not something that's really going away because I have to be alert because I might actually be dying. I can't not ignore the situation. So the fear is one of those real ones where I need to actually react to the threat. And I was wondering if there is a way of handling something like this where these situations just happen a lot and you can't really evade the fear reaction either.
Back in the day, when, let's say, you and I and Board had to go out and get dinner for the tribe, that would be scary, and we would experience fear while we were doing it because it's dangerous. You know, cave bears do not want to be at. And so if you go up and have to bop a cave bear on the head in order to provide dinner for your family, that's a terrifying experience. But you go home with the cave bear, you know, your wife loves you, your kids love you, the whole tribes love you because there's meat for everybody, and you can relax and be safe. But in the modern world, you don't have that experience of relaxing. You know, you might have to hunt the cave bear once a month, not every damn day. And so basically, there's no way around that. And yes, if you lose your awareness of and fear, you're going to get hit by a car or a bus and killed. Because it is a well-known fact that people in cars cannot see bicycles. They're invisible. The moment you get in a car, the bicycle becomes completely invisible and you can't see it. But the answer is that job is guaranteed burnout. Your adrenals are going to be just a mass of scar tissue sitting on top of your kidneys after a while. And don't do it. They don't pay you enough to do that.
Yeah, that was my conclusion as well.
Yeah, that's an artificial situation that they force you into, thinking that you have to survive to do that. And maybe some people are convinced that they do, but if everybody refused to carry those messages on bicycles, especially for the pitiful amount of pay that you get to do it, they'd have to come up with some other way to do that.
Or to make it worth it.
There's nothing
very
that
little
makes
worth
your
it. Yeah.
your adrenal glands failing worth it after a while. Burnout is nasty.
Well, theoretically, they could have more reasonable schedules, but that may be too much to ask.
Well, even if they
And
have
insurance.
a reasonable schedule, moving through that traffic with people not caring if they run over you is terrifying.
Yeah, that's something I find strange in my life right now. In general, that the only real threat to my life is traffic. And I know it's not necessary that it is this way. And there is like one thing in my memory where there was a deer, and I had a moment of, what is this? Because I was outside and there was something loud, and I was like, what's this? And then I was like, it's a deer. It's running away from me. Okay.
Yeah.
But this happens really rarely here, so it's mostly traffic where there is like a moment of fear, and the rest is this underlying fear.
Yeah. It's weird. We are the greatest threat to us.
So my conclusion was I just became a rickshaw rider and showed people around the city, so I could still cycle, but was not as much in traffic and didn't have to be as fast.
Yeah, that works. You probably made more money too.
I did, yeah, and got to talk to people more. It was more interesting. It was less lonely.
It's true. Yeah, you're less, isolated. Yeah.
So, what do you think? Have we learned anything today?
Says yes. Amuro says yes. John gives us a thumbs up. Who haven't we heard from? I just want to check in with.
We haven't hardly heard from Funny
Levita.
or Levita.
Vita, how's it going? What have you been thinking about for the past hour?
What runs through my mind is the old joke when you were talking about feeling the fear and doing it anyway can either be incredibly reckless or incredibly brave. And what I think about is that thing about the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is knowing a tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad.
And yeah.
So yeah, so that's pretty much what's running through my head. So I'm assuming, I could be wrong about this because you know what they say about assume, that there will be some kind of follow-up lesson to help us discern and suss out the difference between vegetable and fruit salad at some point.
Inshallah. If God wills, there will be.
Thanks, Levita. How about you, Funny?
I think this talk has made me realize a few things. For example, when I started stick fighting, I kept having a reaction which was bringing up my other arm to protect me, which got pretty painful after a while because the stick kept hitting my other arm. And when I was startled the other day, I did exactly the same thing.
Oh, wow.
Which was interesting. And at the back of that, I actually, well, the first thing that happened was that I felt ashamed and like I was looking stupid when I had the startle. And then I created the pause, and I was thinking of, you know, there's no need to feel ashamed or anything like that. And I just kept breathing. And after a few minutes or something like that, it kind of, all the tension and shame and everything kind of left my body, which was nice. So it was an interesting experience.
Yeah.
Glad
As
that
I said in the beginning of this
passed.
talk, there are very few negative emotions. Shame is one of the actual negative emotions. Shame has zero value, and is in a special category of emotion. The other is guilt. Shame and guilt, worthless.
Couldn't agree more.
But fear is your friend. Fear is your buddy. Fear is the friend who's whispering in your ear, that thing over there, pay attention. It could eat you.
Something that I was thinking about as well is that fear might be not be a negative emotion, but it's damn uncomfortable sometimes.
Oh, hell yeah. It is totally uncomfortable.
It takes a lot of toll on the body.
Yeah, which is why you don't want to stay there. Fear's job is to protect you in the moment, not a week later.
Thanks, funny. Amaro, I see you're unmuted. Did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah, I had one thought. No, I like what Mustafa just said, is that fear is in the moment. But what about, I mean, there is another kind of silent but deadly kind of fear which robs your dreams away, like fear of failure or fear of rejection. How do you condition yourself to deal with this?
So those are all imagining things happening in the future and then being afraid of those things. And the easiest way to deal with that is stop imagining that shit. It's not real. It does not exist. Don't make like it exists and then act as if it were real. That, of course, is easy to say and hard to do. It takes some serious practice. Has Wild taught you any breath practice?
Yeah, I mean, we've discussed something called the resistance before. I mean, I've had many conversations with Wael about how I would like to do things differently to, let's say, advance in my career. So I'm a graphic designer and an artist, and I have
did
to
that
deal
for years
with
myself.
yeah. So I mean, I have to deal with rejection on a daily basis, doing what I do, and yeah, sometimes it kind of stops me from doing any art at all, which is not something which is something I do. I mean, I want to continue doing art and everything, but I catch myself not doing what I'm supposed to do sometimes out of this fear of rejection.
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
When you have shown a client a piece of work that you've done for them, how often is it actual rejection and how often is it feedback?
Well, 99% it's feedback.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, I know what you mean. More often than not, it's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, somebody can go, oh, that's terrible, I hate you, it's terrible work, give me my money back. That
Yeah.
doesn't happen all that often. Mostly what happens is that they'll look at it and go, I like this, I don't like this up here. Maybe you could change this a little bit.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that I learned to deal with that back when I had my business was I would tell a client, look, I'm going to do this, and you're going to come in and you're going to look at it, and it's going to be wrong. And then you are going to tell me what will make it right, and I'll change it to do that. and you'll come back and it'll be less wrong, but there might be something else. Usually by the third time we have it perfect and your vision is now on the paper or on the computer screen, as the case may
Yeah.
be. And so I set them up for that so that they know that it's not going to be perfect right out of the gate. It never is.
True.
I mean, I have been doing graphic arts 40 years, and I have
Wow.
yet to ever do something perfect the first time.
As a writer as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
like if you build in this sense that, okay, the first draft, how did someone, I think an author, I forget her name, she's like, be willing to write shitty first drafts. Have for granted, because it's gonna happen. And if you have like a miracle, awesome first draft, then that's an outlier. Expect the first version of it not to be perfect. And then we're less attached to the work that we produced and able to be flexible about whatever steps follow after that.
Yeah. The sad fact is that the only way you could produce exactly what the client wants on the first try is if you could read their mind. And you can't, so it takes a try or two.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend that you prime your clients for that. They will be happier in the end.
Yeah, because I would be managing their expectation. Yeah, that's an
Yeah.
interesting strategy. I'll try that.
Yeah, try it. It worked really well for me. So inshallah,
People
it
will
works for you as
appreciate
well.
that. Yeah, I mean, instead of, if you try to sell like every image that I produce just straight out the gate, it's going to be exactly what you want. You're already like shooting yourself down because you're not able to convey to them, hey, I'm flexible. I want to please you. I'm not overly attached to my work to the point where I'm not going to meet your needs.
Yeah.
And so it helps both you and them psychologically to be more comfortable, I would imagine.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Thank you so much.
Yeah. If nothing else, that's worth the hour that you spent here. I
No,
hope.
no, it's all good. It's all good. And thank you, Wael, for inviting me. I mean, it's a very interesting topic.
So, Malu and Roland, I see you guys unmuted again.
I have a little addition to this also. I used to work as a photographer, and what I did is I said to my clients that 3 changes are included in the price, and the 4th one costs extra. So you have that on top, because that happens sometimes that people ask you changes and another change, another change, another change, and you
That's a
end
good
up
way
with,
to create structure. Yeah.
yeah, it's a good way of limiting that and saying it won't be perfect the first try, but if it's not perfect within 3 tries, then your vision is probably not clear.
Renaud, did you have something you wanted to add?
Sorry, me?
Yeah, I just saw you were unmuted, but you're.
No,
sounds
no,
like you're
I'm
upset.
good, thanks. No, I was listening to Madhu and his interesting suggestion. Yeah.
Roland, yeah.
Thank you.
Phoebe.
So quiet today.
Yeah. How's it going for you today with this?
It's a good talk. Definitely something that I deal with a lot of illusionary fear. So it's no need. It's just not needed. So that's encouraging. It's definitely encouraging. I got a lot of tidbits to take with me. So I'm appreciative of that. So when somebody's eating you away, you can't really say much. But yeah, I appreciate it. I really needed to hear these things today.
Anybody else before we wrap up?
Well, I was thinking about, I think one of the things that makes doing this kind of work harder for me is being afraid that if I become more capable, I'll be stuck with responsibilities I can't handle. Which is obviously, a future and even rather ill-defined kind of fear.
And I relate to, though, by the way. So you're not alone in feeling that. But you're right. I mean, that is a future thing that, I mean, is, as BB said, it's kind of illusionary in the sense that's not the reality yet.
Yeah. One thing that I've always used to get around that is asking myself, can I handle what's on my plate today? Right now. And I'm not worrying about next week or next month.
When you question yourself in that way, Mushtaq, what comes of that?
Usually I go, yeah, I can deal with this. This thing that I'm worried about a year from now, it can keep.
So what happens if you have a day where you're like, I actually can't handle everything that's on my plate today?
I pare everything down. The next question is, what can I handle today? And if it's only one thing, then that's fine as long as I get it handled. The other stuff will probably be able to wait. Very few things are that time sensitive. And you can set up your life so that you have fewer time sensitive things like rent. You notice that we never worry about, oh my God, rent is due, right? That's because I've planned ahead. I got our rent paid 2 months in advance. So whenever the money comes in, it's always going to be before it's due. Is that at all useful, Nancy?
Not for this, I don't think, partly because the fear is so vague.
Maybe you can experiment with this as a general process and find out what might work. And then tell me, because if you tell me and it works for you, then I will steal it and, claim that I invented it.
Right.
I
I
can
mean,
relate.
some of it is probably just calling up the fear and breathing.
Yeah. And perhaps pulling yourself back into the present moment where the fear doesn't actually exist yet.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing there's another layer of feeling like I'm not handling what's in front of me very well.
Okay, then that, for me, when that happens, it's a matter of, like I said, chunking things down yet again. What can I handle today? The one thing. Tomorrow, what two things can I handle today?
I think that's super important. I mean, I'm in a business where I have to plan at least a year ahead. I'm in the publishing business, so I have to make sure that we have our catalog items for the fall and next spring and next fall. And I have to think about who's going to be here to make book covers, who's going to do editing and all these things. And sometimes it gets really overwhelming. And that's when I've been thinking throughout this talk, this idea of the pause, to enter into that silent space where none of that exists. And then I can try to let in one thing at a time and do, like Mushtaq said now, what can I do today? Because if I can master this task today, that will help me deal with tomorrow's task, and then it builds from there.
Yeah. And you just happen to meet a graphic artist over in Dubai who probably works cheaper than they do in Norway.
Don't sell them short.
Well, no, the Norwegian prices are just obscene these days. They got all rich from oil and raised the price of everything.
You just ruined the economy over there now.
You
I
ask
can
us.
relate really well to the fear of not having the fear. I feel this quite strongly right now, that I'm afraid of not being afraid, because then all the bad things might happen that I fear so much.
Well, relax. Barring brain damage, you'll always be afraid. That's important because when you find yourself hanging off of a cliff by 3 fingers, you want a little bit of adrenaline, right?
Yeah. Sometimes I find it difficult when I realize I'm afraid of something I just make up, but I'm so deep in the physical fear response. I'm just experiencing fear physically, and I know that there's nothing to be afraid of. And yeah, but I also noticed that the more fundamental breath I do when I'm not afraid, the easier it gets, because I'm like, actually I can breathe. But still, it takes quite some time to.
Yeah. And we have specific tools that we can use for things like that. When you talk with Noor, ask her about them, and if she doesn't know them, I'll teach them to her while you're not looking, and then she'll look like she's done them for years.
We'll discuss more. Didi, I see you're unmuted. Do you have more thoughts you wanted to share?
Yeah, I just had a comment. I really feel like it's doable. I can, like, measurably, I guess, see myself having more, I guess, being able to better manage my fear response, just when thoughts come and fears come, using these tools, like I say, you know what, this is not today, this is not something that I need to, use my time. And I just see myself changing my thought patterns, to be able to be, it may happen a little quicker the next time. Maybe I wouldn't spend, a minute thinking about something goofy, and that's a minute that I had to think about something conducive, So I feel like it's very doable. Like, this is something that I can get better at.
Yeah,
And I think you will. So
I would put money on it. I'd take
yeah.
that bet.
Yeah. So let's have one last person. We'll have Levita, and then we'll wrap up. I see she has her hand up.
The reason you see smoke behind me is because I've been burning a lot of wood up here during this conversation. And if this is the wrong time, let me know and I'll just stop. But I've noticed for me that I don't have much physical fear. It's very binary, my physical fear, like big dog growling, no. Fluffy dog laughing, yes. I'm not afraid of heights, but if I'm up on top of a really big, tall place with somebody I don't trust, it'll start the spike. Like, I can really parse out very easily whether my fear is rational or not. But you mentioned at the beginning of the call about how our culture is kind of skewed. And I find that mental, emotional, social fear, by the time I parse out what's really wrong, it's too late to get out of it. So I find myself going, if something doesn't feel right, I'm out. I'll figure it out later. And sometimes it served me well. And sometimes I missed out on a good time, or I missed out on something that I really wanted, because that fear, that non-physical fear kind of swamped or overwhelmed me. And I've found that the ways I've dealt with physical fear haven't really worked that well with the emotional, social, mental. Like physical, it's like train in advance and in the moment react. But that doesn't seem to work so well for me on the other side. And I'm not certain what to do about that. Usually what I do is I just go silent. But I find I don't think fast enough to, like some people do. You know, you say the wrong things to them and they're like,
Yeah.
they'll snap right back at you and put you in your place. But I find that by the time I think of what to say or what to do, it's just a mess. Any ideas?
Work on the pause. That is probably the single most important thing you can do.
So it sounds like accept the pause as opposed
Yeah,
to
accept
feeling
the
like
pause. Yeah.
I'm failing because I'm not coming with that snappy comeback or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, because sometimes I've been put in a position where I have to make a decision right now. When I've had that happen, my pause says always say no. If I'm being pressured to make a decision in real time without getting a chance to think about it, the answer is no.
That's a pretty safe heuristic. You know, you are not going to get in trouble a whole lot by doing that. You might miss out on, like you said, on something that you wanted, but you're not going to end up in a ditch somewhere.
That would be good. That would be good.
Yeah.
Ditches are not fun.
No. So the first thing you have to do is to acknowledge that you're taking care of yourself with this tactic. This tactic is at least situationally a survival tactic. And once you do that and can accept that, then you can look at ways to maybe alter it if it seems appropriate.
Yeah, I've encountered stuff where it's like there's this pressure brought to bear for me to do something, and then I will react with, if I'm being pressured, the answer is no. Something in there is not really to my best interest. And
that
when
makes total sense, though. I mean,
yeah, and when
I can't see that as a problem.
I think the problem is the people who are around me, because, for example, early on last year, during the early part of the pandemic, I was like, I'm in my house, that's it. Hello, grocery delivery. And as things lightened up, people were like, did you get your vaccine yet? And I was like, no, because right now there are people who need it more, like first responders and medical personnel and the police and the fire departments. Like we were at a point where if you had certain issues, you had priority. And I was in a position where, you know what, I can sit tight for another 6-8 months. And I was getting a lot of pressure from people who, to be quite honest, wouldn't have taken care of me if I had gotten sick, to like, go get this thing and then go out and be among people. And I was like, but I'm looking at the data, and the data says, for me, can't speak for anybody else, but for me, this wasn't the best idea. So, you know, I've been trusting myself, but it's been really difficult when people I consider friends and people I could trust are pressuring me to do something that I feel is diametrically opposed to my health and safety. So it's been kind of difficult.
Yeah.
And I'm not certain, like, where does it end? Like, where do I absolutely know that maybe I'm overreacting? Because the feedback I'm getting from the people I know is that I'm overreacting. It's not that big a deal. It's just a cold or whatever. And I'm using that as an example. I can list any number of other things, but.
I always like the what I tell you 3 times is true rule. If you say to me, hey, let's do this. And I go, yeah, I don't know. And you go, I really want to do this with you. And you go, and I go, well, maybe, but I'm not sure. And the third time there where I feel the pressure, then it's like, no, I can't do this.
Yeah.
So what are they doing? You know?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it's been going too.
Yeah.
I mean, by the 4th time, it's like, I'm over here with, you know, the bricks and the trowel, building the wall.
Yeah, well, the thing to remember is that affirmative consent isn't just for snuggling up with somebody. Affirmative consent is absolutely necessary. And if you are being pressured, that can't be affirmative consent.
Agreed. Agreed.
So,
Yeah. I how do I put this? One of the things I've noticed, because I have allowed myself to be pressured into doing stuff, not recently, it's been a while, but when I was much younger, I would allow myself to be pressured into something that I thought, I don't think this is a good idea, but I allowed somebody to pressure me into it. And then it went sideways like I thought it would. And instead of the person just going, wow, sorry, you were right, we should have listened to you, or something to that effect, I got, well, if you knew it was going to go sideways, why did you let me
do it then?
Yes. Why did you go along with it? And it was like, okay, so it's my fault no matter what happens.
No, that's
okay,
not your
got it.
responsibility. No.
Oh,
Yeah.
I agree. But if I'm going to get the blame for it anyway, it's like, I'm going to do what I want if I'm going to get the blame for it anyway.
Yeah.
At least then I did what I wanted,
Yeah.
I think we moved into more like emotional manipulation and abuse at this point than
Yeah.
fear.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Yeah. But the fear feels the same, whether it's somebody's putting a gun to your head or whether somebody is threatening you with emotional abandonment. Like in my
Yeah,
gut,
your
it
body is
all
not going to
feels
tell the
same.
difference between those two.
Yeah.
Fear is
Yeah.
fear.
Yeah. But I mean, like if I'm watching a TikTok video where somebody has a camera on their helmet and they jump off a cliff and you see, yeah, that is if you mess this up, you ain't coming back from it. That I find I will go, but I recognize here, I am safe. I'm sitting in a chair. I'm nowhere near that high space, but emotionally, it just feels like, wow, what on earth?
Well, I mean, eventually, it's the pause that comes back into play. It's the pause that helps us take that beat to reground and to reassess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we did a video on affirmative consent at some point. So maybe
If we hadn't, we should have,
Yeah.
because it is an essential, fundamental pillar of the school.
If we've done it, we'll link to it, and if we haven't, we're
We'll
putting it
do
on
it.
the
Yeah.
list. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And now I'm thinking, like, just as you say that, I'm thinking, I've talked to the occasional person over the years, and it's like, well, don't you want this person to be excited about doing this thing with you? And they're like, I don't care as long as I get what I want. And then it's like, to me, I'm like, okay, now you're out there with this red flag like this. Like, it's time to
Yeah.
get away from this person.
So,
So, yeah.
That's a good topic for us to address if we have not already. So thank you, Levita.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any last minute thoughts? I'm switching this over to Brady Bunch
Brady
mode.
Bunch mode.
Brady Bunch mode. We can
Yay.
see us. Yay. Hi, us.
Hi, puppy. All right. So yeah, we can wave to everyone who is here, wave to each other, and then wave to everyone who's watching on YouTube and say goodbye. Thank you to everyone who showed up today. This is awesome. It's so great to see all these people here who haven't even shown up before. We have a doggy here visiting. This is awesome.
Yes.
Thank you so much, everyone. And we will see you in our evening talk at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard
Which
Time.
is going to be lots of fun and is going to be about rest and recovery and its essential place within the work.
So look forward to that. We'll see you later.
All right, folks. Catch you next time.